Have you ever wondered why that person just won't leave your mind? Why, even as time passes, certain thoughts continue to revolve around someone in particular, as if an invisible force were drawing your consciousness toward that figure. Constantly thinking about someone might seem like a mere mental habit or even an emotional distraction. But what if this process hides a deeper calling, a spiritual sign, a mirror of your own unconscious trying to speak to you? In this exploration, we dive into the hidden layers of the mind and soul to understand what it truly means to think about someone incessantly. You'll discover how this may be linked to internal processes of healing, projection, and even intertwined destinies. If you feel there's something more behind these thoughts, write in the comments. I believe the universe is preparing something great for me. According to Carl Jung's analytical psychology, constantly thinking about someone is rarely just about the other person. Often, this persistent thought is a reflection of internal content that has yet to be fully recognized or integrated. Jung, who was once a student of Freud before developing his own theories, believed that the psyche operates through a complex system of conscious and unconscious elements. When we find ourselves unable to stop thinking about someone, we're experiencing what Jung would call a complex, an emotionally charged group of ideas or images that exists partly in the unconscious mind. One of the key concepts to understand this phenomenon is projection. When we project, we transfer parts of our own psyche, parts that remain unconscious, onto someone else. The person occupying our thoughts might be carrying something that is actually our own, something that needs to be seen. For example, if you find yourself constantly thinking about someone's confidence or creativity, ask yourself, is this a quality I possess but haven't fully embraced? Projection operates like a psychological mirror, reflecting back aspects of ourselves we've yet to recognize. In Jung's own words, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The intensity of our preoccupation often correlates with the significance of what's being projected. Another essential concept is that of the shadow. The shadow represents all the parts of ourselves that we reject or hide. When someone triggers intense emotions and comes to dominate our thoughts, it is possible that this figure is mirroring a repressed fragment of our identity. The shadow isn't merely negative, it contains undeveloped positive qualities as well. That person you can't stop thinking about might embody qualities you've denied in yourself: spontaneity, vulnerability, strength, or even ambition. Consider Sarah, who couldn't stop thinking about her colleague James, who boldly shared his opinions in meetings. Her preoccupation wasn't about romantic interest, but about James embodying a freedom of expression she had suppressed in herself since childhood, when speaking up was discouraged. Recognizing the shadow is the first step toward inner transformation. As Jung stated, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This process can also indicate that we are on the path of individuation, the profound journey of self-knowledge and integration that leads to the maturation of the self. On this journey, recurring figures in our thoughts may appear as archetypes, living symbols pointing us towards something greater. Perhaps this person represents the archetype of a lover, a friend, a guide, or even a rival, bringing symbolic messages that need to be deciphered. They become waypoints on our map to self-discovery, illuminating aspects of ourselves that need attention. Individuation isn't about achieving perfection but wholeness, embracing all facets of our being, including the contradictions and complexities. The person who occupies our thoughts becomes a catalyst for this process. Furthermore, Jung invites us to reflect on the anima and animus, the feminine and masculine aspects that dwell within our psyche. The figure that never leaves your mind might symbolize an encounter with these inner energies, signaling a call for reconciliation and balance. Men who can't stop thinking about a particular woman might be encountering their anima, the feminine aspect of their psyche seeking expression. Similarly, women fixated on a certain man may be wrestling with their animus, the masculine principle within themselves. These archetypes don't merely reflect gender stereotypes, but represent complementary psychological forces that seek harmony. When integrated, they allow for greater emotional intelligence, creativity, and relational depth. Thinking about someone in this sense can be more than just longing or obsession. It may be your soul trying to reveal what still needs to be healed, integrated, and recognized. At first glance, constantly thinking about someone might seem like an external, almost accidental phenomenon. However, from the perspective of Jung's analytical psychology, it is often a deep message coming from the unconscious. The human mind doesn't function merely as a passive receiver of reality. It organizes, interprets, and projects internal images onto the world, and especially onto other people. Projection is a symbolic language of the soul. When we project, we see in the other something that belongs to us yet has not been acknowledged as our own. This dynamic is inevitable at the beginning of any emotional relationship. Consider how often we meet someone and feel an immediate, inexplicable connection. Jung might suggest that this isn't coincidence but recognition. We've encountered someone who carries the projection of an important aspect of ourselves. When we connect with someone, be it through love, admiration, anger, or fascination, we start projecting onto that person parts of our own psyche that remain unconscious. Thus, repeatedly thinking about someone can reflect the intensity of that projection. The other becomes a mirror, carrying traits, qualities, or wounds that we need to see in order to better understand ourselves. Jung states that every significant human encounter involves projection. When we are not aware of this, we become trapped in what he calls a projected complex, believing that the other is the source of a particular feeling or obsession, when in reality, it is what they represent internally for us that triggers all of this. Constantly thinking about someone may mean that that figure has activated an important psychic content, a message that the soul wants to bring to light. For instance, if someone we barely know starts to inhabit our thoughts, that person might be representing an internal archetypal image, such as the hero, the healer, the mother, or the trader. And this archetype is being projected onto them. Consider David, who found himself repeatedly thinking about a charismatic leader he had met at a workshop. The leader embodied qualities of authority, wisdom, and decisive action that David needed to integrate on his own path toward becoming a more authentic leader himself. This individuation process requires courage, as it demands confronting the shadow, dismantling projections, and listening to what truly lies behind the persistent thought. Sometimes the other represents a repressed desire, an unhealed wound, or even an untapped potential. In other words, they may be the external image of a part of us that is being called to consciousness. The tendency is to fixate on the person, but the task is to examine what they mirror. That is why many emotionally or mentally intense relationships serve as catalysts for profound transformations. Not because they are destined in a romantic sense, but because they provoke an internal reorganization. Constantly thinking about someone may be the beginning of a journey to integrate parts that were once divided: reason and emotion, strength and vulnerability, masculine and feminine, past and present. This call for integration is an invitation to psychic maturity. Jung shows us that individuation does not happen in isolation, but through encounters with the other. The relationship with that figure who occupies our thoughts can be the symbolic setting where inner dramas take shape and gain consciousness. Even if the concrete interaction does not exist or was brief, the psychic bond is real and powerful because it mobilizes archetypal forces within us. And it is in this mobilization that the opportunity for growth arises. However, it is important not to confuse this call with a desperate search for external answers. Obsession with the other is a sign that psychic energy is still projected and that there is inner work to be done. In this context, that persistent thought is a symptom of something more essential: the need to find oneself. As Jung eloquently stated, your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. Individuation begins when we stop seeking outside what can only be found within. When we manage to withdraw the projection and understand the symbol that the other represents, we create space for a new kind of relationship with ourselves. The persistent thought dissolves, not because it vanishes, but because it is resignified. The person ceases to be an enigma or an unbearable absence and comes to be seen as an emissary of the psyche, a call from the self to consciousness. It is at this point that true transformation begins. Integrating the content symbolized by the other means recognizing that the mental image was, in reality, a reflection of ourselves. And this recognition does not distance us from the world. On the contrary, it brings us closer to life with greater wholeness, clarity, and authenticity. Constantly thinking about someone might seem like mere mental noise, an emotional discomfort, or even a senseless coincidence. But when we look through the eyes of the soul, we realize that this thought is, in fact, an invitation, a silent call to dive into the deepest layers of our being, where the shadow, projections, archetypes, and the self reside. The person who insists on occupying our thoughts is often a symbol, and by decoding that symbol, we not only come to understand the other, we come to understand ourselves. This path is demanding. It asks us for the courage to face what is hidden, the maturity to withdraw projections, and the sensitivity to embrace what still hurts. But it is also a path of liberation. The true answer is never found in the other, but in what the other awakens within us. As Jung himself concluded, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. If this exploration has touched something within you, subscribe to our channel and enable notifications. This helps YouTube understand that you value deep reflections. Remember, everything that touches you deeply wants to transform.